One of the most famous battles of the War of 1812 occurred after the war ended. How did this happen? What were the results? By 1814, it was clear to both the British and the Americans that neither side was gaining the upper hand in the conflict. The war had become a stalemate, and the British were wary because there was little to be gained by continuing to fight. And the public was becoming disgruntled by wartime taxation. Americans were frustrated because the British blockade had severely damaged foreign trade and crippled the U.S. economy. In August of 1814, both factions sent delegations to Ghent, Flanders, in present-day Belgium, to discuss a peace treaty. The negotiations were slow and tedious because neither side could agree on the terms. The eventual result was a return to the status quo, meaning things would revert back to how they were prior to the war. On December 24, 1814, diplomats signed the Treaty of Ghent, which the British ratified 3 days later. Unfortunately, because of the slow methods of communication and lengthy time to travel across the Atlantic Ocean, the battling armies in North America were unaware of the peace agreement, and word would not reach them for several months. On December 14, 1814, 60 British ships, carrying over 14,000 soldiers and sailors, anchored just off the coast of New Orleans in the Gulf of Mexico. Several days later, on December 23rd, a force of 1,800 British soldiers landed on the east bank of the Mississippi River, 9 miles south of New Orleans. They could have marched into New Orleans unopposed, but instead, they made camp and waited for additional forces to arrive. That evening, General Andrew Jackson led an attack against this force. As a result of this brief skirmish, the British became additionally cautious and did not advance their position for several days. While the British waited, the Americans bolstered their fortifications. They put a heavy line of cannons in place and constructed earthworks to protect the artillery. As the Battle of New Orleans approached, additional reinforcements strengthened the American defense of the city. By the time the battle began, Jackson's force consisted of more than 4,700 men, including members of the U.S. Army, U.S. Marines, militiamen, Choctaw warriors, and numerous other volunteers. Also joining in the battle was Jean Lafitte and his band of pirates, whom Jackson had guaranteed to pardon if they assisted in defending the city. However, this force still paled in comparison to the 14,000-man army that was approaching. The bulk of the British Army arrived on January 1, 1815. The two sides exchanged artillery fire for over 3 hours that day, but the British delayed their attack until their full force had gathered. Finally, on January 8, 1815, the British marched on the American forces. The attack began in darkness and dense fog. However, the British faced withering artillery fire, and chaos reigned in the dark and fog. The battle only lasted about 25 minutes and was a complete rout. The British lost 285 men, with more than 1,200 wounded, and another 500 taken prisoner. Meanwhile, the American forces under Jackson had 13 dead and 30 wounded. Having suffered a resounding defeat, the British retreated to the Gulf of Mexico. Eventually, it was learned that a peace treaty had been signed, and thus the entire incident had been in vain. The Battle of New Orleans had a significant impact on the American public. The stunning victory provided enormous confidence in the final days of the War of 1812. It also propelled Andrew Jackson to the status of a national hero which eventually took him all the way to the presidency.